elections in Nigeria. We're having conversations that will help us, think in the right direction towards this huge event that we're expecting next year. Without wasting much of our time, I will be also introducing my co-hosts in person of Judith Akatuba. Judith, it's a pleasure to have you here again. Welcome on board, Judith.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's also a pleasure for me. This is one of the events that marks the start of my week, and I always look forward to having this time with everyone here. Thank you, Tolu. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening. Certainly, also is one that we have every Sunday evening. For those who may not know, this may be the first time you'll be joining us on a Sunday evening like this, 8 p.m. Nigerian time, West African time. We hold Twitter space conversations about, political and social, or more political or social, Oh, I beg your pardon. I just mixed that up. We're talking about issues. Yeah, this whole thing. Yeah, we're talking about issues that has to do with the country and leadership and moving forward. About last week, we are talking with David Ondane about the burden of truth. It was quite an interesting conversation that lasted for 2 hours. And this week, we have another interesting personality that we will be talking to in the person of Professor Chris Nwaokoabia. I hope I pronounced that right. But then I look forward to this conversation because we're looking at an interesting topic, the Nigeria of our dream. I cannot wait for us to dig deep because I know that for everyone here, we all have an idea of what the the Nigeria of our dream is or should be. However, over 60 years, 62 years and counting, we are still stuck with a Nigeria that we can only pray that it gets better. So tonight, it's going to be an interesting conversation. Before we get into the conversation, before I introduce our guest properly, I'd like to encourage us to share this room. This space, you can retweet, you can, invite other people to join because we'll be allowing not just for the conversation to hold between ourselves and our guests, but also people can ask questions and ask them directly to our guests. Now, before we also go further, I would like to go through the ground rules. I don't know if Judith will be able to read to us the ground rules. These are rules that govern how we converse or how we hold the space for people who will be speaking. All right, while I wait for Judy, I'll just go ahead to go through the ground rules. So first thing on our list is that you should try as much as you can to stick to the conversation. We want to income speakers, questions that you want to ask, abide by that with us. So let's, be careful faster and not go round and round again. It's in a way related to what we're going to get into the conversation for of country first person than Professor Chris Mustapha is already made a movement. We see everything to be broad, but I thought about it as well while preparing for this conversation, and I felt like when we're talking about something which is our dreamland, which is where we're going to, or it is an idea of what we want, it is only okay for us to also take a look at the past, where we're coming from, and try to understand why we are where we are. And this will give us a context to where we aspire to be. So it's no news, of course. Everyone knows that 1960 we gained independence, and which means that we're allowed to govern ourselves. From that period or from that time, that point in time, it will be assumed that the African leaders at the time, or particularly Nigeria here, is it the vision not being right, or the players not playing properly, or there are other factors that we weren't paying attention to that has stopped us or stalled the movement to bring in Nigeria to where it ought to be? Of course, they say we're the giant of Africa, very blessed nation, yet we're still in a spot that we can only pray for better. So, Professor, let's start from the past to the present. What would you say has brought us to this point that we cannot be proud to say this is the Nigeria that we all dream about?
Chico, it's my pleasure to be on the hot seat today. It is my pleasure to be called upon to challenge our countrymen and women, to challenge young people to think and dream about a greater Nigeria. But like you noted, you can't talk about the dream without understanding where we're coming from. You cannot dream without knowing exactly where you are. And so you noted it was on 1st of October 1960 that the Union Jack was lowered and the green, white, green went up in the sky, announcing an independent country. And from that moment, the challenge of running our own affairs began. Sadly and unfortunately, after we got independence, perhaps those who were involved in the process did not properly address the challenges of nationhood. Perhaps they were carried away by the euphoria of a new nation. Perhaps the lofty dreams that they had didn't have so much of a wonderful foundation. Oftentimes I tell people, I'm a good student of history. It's actually one of my best subjects, and I loved it so much. Maybe that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know, I think that our problem started from the start, when those who got us independence did not perhaps tell themselves exactly how they wanted to govern this new nation. But bad as it was, they were somewhat, I tell people, compared to what we have today, they did their best. In 1963, they were able to strike a Republican constitution. We had some kind of true federalism. We had some kind of fiscal control. So in the First Republic, that was between the years of our Lord 1960 and 1966. In between, we had elections in 1964, 63. We had regional elections. We had premiers because we had a parliamentary system then. We had a prime minister and the president, governor general initially, and then that was Zeke. And then in 1963, he became the president general. But what is important to note is that in the First Republic, we had some of the issues that we have today, but perhaps not as bad as we have it today. We had issues of ethnicity playing a role in politics. We had issues of what Nzogu called 10%ers when they struck in January 1966, accusing the First Republic politicians of corruption. But then what we called 10%, now I don't even know whether we have 100%.
Hello, Prof. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear you, and I don't know if it's just a Prof. Prof, if you can hear me, maybe you should try to mute your mic and unmute. Probably that would.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, great, great. I can hear you now.
Okay. I don't know where, up to where you got me, but I was talking about the civil war that came in 1967 because we couldn't resolve our contradictions. And I remember, I'm going to leave you with some quotes. At some point in 1962-63, there was a debate amongst our leaders. One of the leaders opted for Nigerians more patriotic and understand and forgetting our differences. And then one, I don't want to call the name so it doesn't look like, because I think that Nigerians and indeed this country can do and rise above those contradictions and deal with issues fundamentally. So I wouldn't call the names of the leaders, but I'll bring up some of the quotes that they left us with. And then one of the leaders said, we shouldn't bother about our differences. We should soar beyond and over our differences. And then one said, no, we can't ignore our differences. We should try to understand our differences. And then one of the other leaders said that what was important was about capacity and competency and how we can appropriate our wealth for greatness. Unfortunately, in 1966-67, these differences soared above the logics and the debates that they had. And then we had a coup in January and another coup in July, and then a war in 1967. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then we had a 30-month war between 67 and January 1970. Then in the year of my birth, 1971, I heard, and now I'm going straight to the topic, I heard that a certain country in the Asian axis came to Nigeria to collect palm oil seedlings and then collect a free of palm seedlings, particularly. And that country, 51 years after, exports palm oil worth well over 300 billion naira to Nigeria every year. Yet, we do not have enough. We pay so much for it. I am also aware that some countries that we gave support and leverage to in the 60s and the early 70s, countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and the likes, have become very industrialized nations, and they're doing very well. I'm also aware that we're citizens of a country that has the most intelligent immigrant population in the United States of America. I'm aware that we're the country of the most intelligent family in the United Kingdom, the Mafidons. I'm aware that we're a country blessed by God with amazing resources, like Awo would say, and riches ineffable. I'm aware, compatriots, that we're citizens of a country with the best open heart surgeon in the world. I'm aware that we're the country with the father of the internet, Philip Emeagwali. I'm aware that our country produced the best living mathematician in the world, Gabriel Oyibo. I'm aware that a certain Adegoke or so from Ogun State is the best open heart surgeon in the world. I'm aware that a Nigerian from Kano developed or designed one of the best vehicles in the world today. The reason I'm saying this is because the topic speaks to these issues, the Nigeria of our dream. Fundamentally, when our founding fathers bettered this nation, when the Union Jack came down and the green, white, green went up, we had a national anthem that said, though tongues and tribes may differ, in brotherhood we stand. That was our first national anthem that was replaced, I think, in 1978, about 44 years ago. Now, that didn't seem to cut an ice, because even after the Civil War, I think it was in 1973 or so, Gowon came up with the National Youth Service Scheme, which had the motive of uniting our country. How united are we today? I think in our entire history, Nigerians are more divided today than ever before. What is our dream as a nation? That speaks to that question again. And then as we talk today, like you noted in your opening commentary, we're looking at 2023, another effort at nationhood, at rebetting, at restarting, and at making our country great again. And that is why one of the greatest philosophers will say that if you do not know where you're coming from, it almost will be difficult to locate your path to the future and progress. So we, as grail bearers of a new day, must understand where we're headed, perhaps by very well appreciating where we're coming from. I don't know whether so many of you know that at some point in the history of this country, a former head of state boasted that our problem wasn't how to make money, that God has blessed us with so much money, that our problem was how to spend it. And at that point in history, Nigeria bailed out T&T, Trinidad and Tobago. At that point in our history, Nigeria was helping fund the revolution against apartheid in South Africa. Nigeria was helping the Zimbabwe struggle. Nigeria was helping the struggle in Angola. Nigeria was supporting every movement for progress and change in Africa. Today, Nigeria is perhaps at the nadir. Today, Nigeria is perhaps struggling to find its feet. So, understanding where we are as a people, in 1966, in 1975, some young Nigerian thought that our country could effectively be refocused. He came in by a coup that took out Jack Yakubu Gowon, and that was Murtala Mohammed. And he began the effort at cleansing the audience table and fighting corruption. He did his best at that, but what happened? Less than a year after, about 7 months after, he was taken out in a coup. And that was how they truncated the process. Then the first era of Olusegun Obasanjo in 1976 began. I won't bother you with so much of the history, but I'll tell you that at that point, Nigeria made some foray into progress. Yes, the Nigerian shipping line was founded. I think the Nigerian Airways came up. The Nigerian refineries, about 2 refineries, a few federal universities, so much pluses, if you like. But then there was the issue of corruption coming into our body politic, this time more bravely. Then we had the Second Republic between 1979 and 1984. And the issues like the First Republic that truncated the Second Republic were issues of corruption. Please take note, I'm leading this discussion somewhere. Another time, we had a truncation of the civilian era. The major challenge, like 1966, was the issues of corruption, the wastage of our collective patrimony, where a few individuals took what belonged to all for themselves and their children and children's children in fee simple. So our nation suffered another truncation of its democratic process in 1983, December 31st. And then the present President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria became the head of state in January 1st, 1984. That's Muhammadu Buhari. Fast forward to the Babangida years, the Abacha years, the Absalam Abubakar years, and then we had another effort at democracy in 1999. Now, our country's history has been checkered with not only issues of ethnicity and religion, which has cost us quite a lot of lives, but basically and chiefly allegations of corruption and mismanagement of our collective patrimony, where the allegations of a $12.4 billion oil windfall. We had issues of a Abacha loot, and our record still has it that even in debt, he still sends money to Nigeria in the name of recovered loots. Then in 1999, we had another effort at democracy, and that was the beginning of the PDP that ruled for 16 years. and then the APC that has done 7 years. I hope we're here together.
Yes, absolutely. I'm following.
Okay, then. So, what importantly, the reason I've gone through this is because I want you to locate the fact that at every turn, the major challenge has been issues of corruption, issues of a leadership that has been largely irresponsible. And then the quest for our country has been that of responsible and responsive leadership. Remember that at some point in our history, about exactly 29 to 30 years ago, something happened in our political amphitheater, and it was massive. And it was the June 12th People's Movement that saw to the emergence of Chief Nwaokoabia as the winner of the June 12th election. Now, chiefly, I'm going to deal with issues very strongly now. Don't forget that in 1963, Nigeria became a republic. 30 years after, the Abiola Revolution came. The movement for a new Nigeria. And to obedience, this will make a lot of sense to you, so follow me. I'm a bit metaphysical. I believe in numbers too, and I believe in the supreme hand as the one that directs the affairs of man. So that is why up to today, one of the most studied documents in the Pentagon in America is the prophecies of Nostradamus. You can't walk away from history and the major issues that has happened, the major challenges of your history, the major high points, the low points, and the prophetic. So in 1963, we became a republic. 30 years after, Nigerians struggled to right the wrongs of our nation by looking out for not necessarily a saint, but someone who came with hope and promises of a new Nigeria. That effort was truncated by IBB and Abacha. And that effort died with Abiola. So many of us today became activists, were detained and held in prisons and police custodies, SSS and DSS facilities for months because we insisted that Abiola should be released and sworn in as president. But unfortunately, he died in prison. 30 years after that effort is going to be the 2023 general elections. Another revolution of sorts. Nigerians are stepping out and they're moving around. Unlike the 1993 process, young people, men and women across our nation are taking ownership of the democratic process, are taking ownership of the space. And these young people have chosen a name that resonates. Yes, it's perhaps the name of from the name of a presidential candidate, but the presidential candidate has been reasonable enough to admit that they are not necessarily the ones who are running for presidency, but the Nigerian young people are running for presidency through them. I'm quoting Peter Gregory Obi. As we talk today, there's an effort across our nation to take back our country and to give our country a new hope and a new destiny, a new day and a new purpose. And it's strong enough, and I believe very personally that that hope and faith will come true. We're looking at a country whose dreams are about progress, greatness. The dream of our people, even after they dropped the original anthem of this country and chose another anthem in 1978, the words of that anthem resonates. Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our fatherland, love and strength and faith. Nigerians want to serve their country. They want a country that serves them. Nigerians want a country that works for all. We want a country that uses the amazing riches that God has blessed us with for progress. We want a country that exploits the massive human resources for amazing growth. We want a country that spends every kobo for the good of the country and our collective betterment. We want a country whose rainbow coalition of sorts, the multiple tribes and tendencies, our religious, our variegated tendencies as a people counts for blessing. There are countries across the world whose multiplicity has become some kind of blessing. So Nigerians actually believe that together we can forge a rainbow coalition of sorts. But what's holding us down? Chinua Achebe wrote a book, and in his book he said there was a country. And in that book he was able to locate the failure of this nation on leadership. Fundamentally, countrymen and women, our problem as a nation has been that of a failure of leadership. Permit me use the word absence of leadership. As I talk to you, that is why I am extremely passionate and proud of what the young people of this country are doing today. That is why I'm excited, profusely and profoundly obedient. That is why I think that together we can bet a new nation that is not only responsible and responsive to our people, but a nation that works for all. And that is why, as we talk this evening, our dreams as a people and as a nation is not utopian. Our quest for El Dorado is not an impossible one. I don't know whether you know that of the richest resources in the world, about 46 prized mineral resources in our world, Nigeria alone has about 36 to 37 of them buried in its soil. I don't know whether you know that God has given us monstrous wealth. I don't know whether you know that we should have no reason to be in poverty. We should have no reason with power outages. But unfortunately, the worst species of rulers in the world have found themselves in this space, in the Nigerian space. And the Nigerian place have been where demons live and dwell in the name of leaders. People have stolen monies that they do not need in 10 lifetimes. And you ask yourself, do they have their brains, or is there something wrong with the kind of leaders we've had? As we talk today, you are aware of how our oil, a nation and its leaders loot and steal their oil and leave the nation hungry and poor. You're aware of how leadership is impervious to logic, and we have the dumbest set of people in power. But is that enough to throw the dreams overboard? Is that enough to torpedo our collective dreams and aspirations? Is that enough to give up on Nigeria? And the answer is a capital letter no. Why are we still so very passionate about this country? I'll give you one of the reasons. When Nelson released Lala Mandela came out of prison, and they asked him, you have gone across the world thanking the nations that supported your struggle. Why haven't you gone to Nigeria? He answered them that I'm very angry with Nigeria, because Nigeria is a country that God has blessed so much, and Nigeria should lead Africa and the new world. And then he said that only until Nigeria rises can Africa rise. And when Africa rises, we will have a new world of genuine brotherhood. Compatriots, that dream remains in so many of us, in millions of us. Unfortunately, Nigeria has been held down by less than 5% of our population, people whose greed is abnormal, people who steal monies that they don't need in 10 lifetimes, people who are soulless and who perhaps have sold their entire essence to the devil. But we have a new opportunity. In our historicity, we've had this opportunity in 1963, in 1993, and yet again, we have it in the year of our Lord 2023. That is why I'm talking to you very passionately, because I know that together we can birth that new day. I know that together we can fulfill the promises of this nation. I know that together we can fulfill the dreams of a great country called Nigeria. Have you wondered what the colors of our national flag epitomizes? The green and the white. The green perhaps symbolizes and epitomizes our wealth, our article wealth, and if you like, by extension, our human wealth, which, of course, you know that of every 6 black men in the world, 1 is a Nigerian. I hope you're also aware that God has blessed us with monstrous resources, and so we're a country that is green. The white should otherwise symbolize our purity and our beautiful character, but unfortunately, we have lost them. What therefore is our dream? Our dream is to make the green, white, green a nation of great pride. And then don't forget the coat of arms, the horse and the eagle, strength, vitality, vigor, and greatness. And indeed, the country has the potentialities to achieve greatness. That is why, and I tell people that Peter Gregory Obi is not a saint, but is our best and our shortest cut to the fulfillment of our collective dreams and aspirations. He's the one who speaks to the issues that Chief Obafemi Awolowo of blessed memory will talk about, which is about creativity, about production, and about growing our collective wealth for greatness. Don't forget that in the First Republic, the Western region was able to grow monstrous wealth from cocoa, and the first major high-rise building in the whole of Africa was the Cocoa House in Ibadan. Don't forget the Liberty Stadium, the University of Ibadan, the Obafemi Awolowo University in Ife. Don't forget that we had monstrous, the premier hotels, and we had so much wealth and beautiful roads. Don't also forget the beautiful wealth that came from hides and skin, cocoa pyramids, and the rice pyramids in the north, that the MPC led by Sadwana and Ahmadu Bello were able to grow. Don't forget the beautiful wealth that came out of cocoa, palm oil, and all that in the southeast. Nigeria was a beautiful country because we had some kind of true fiscal federalism. And so, tied to the need for a new Nigeria that fulfills the dreams of its citizenry is the need for, some people fear because politicians have consistently lied about it, the need for restructuring. We must devolve power from the center. Nigeria has come over the years to grow an almighty federal government that is a rent seeker and a rent taker. Nigeria has to grow wealth. You want to say something, sir?
No, no problem. Just still listening to you, Prof.
Okay. Nigeria has come to become a rent-taking and a rent-seeking estate. And so the wealth from cocoa has gone. The wealth from palm oil, coal has gone. Our rubber plantations have gone dry. The wealth from rice, the pyramids of granite and heights and skin have gone. And that's because instead of running what was like the First Republic system, where the states and the regions controlled their resources and paid tax and a certain percentage of their earnings to the federal government, we have a federal government that is greedy and has taken over almost all that this country has. So the regions and the states have become very lazy. At the end of every month, they come to the center to receive what you call federal allocations. In the First Republic, it was the reverse. The states would generate their resources, keep 50%, send 30% to the federal government, and send 20% to a dedicated account for the support of the regions that perhaps do not have so much. So we had what we call some kind of equity, not only in distribution of resources, but support for every part of this country. What does this country need? This country must look back at the past and take the lessons from the beautiful parts of our history where we had some kind of control over resources. And do you know what it will do? It will make you laugh, but this is the truth. If the regions were to control their resources, so many people do not know. Politicians, because they are lazy, have lied to our brothers in the North. Indeed, I don't know whether you know, but this is the truth. The North is the richest part of our country in terms of mineral resources and arable land. And so if we had a restructured country, perhaps our total dependence on oil would just have not been the issue. You know how much America makes from agriculture alone? This country has multiple, God has given us resources in manifolds. The North has so much mineral resources. The South has a lot of mineral resources. The South also has exceptional human capital. So God, in his magnificence, has blessed this country with enough to do well. Going forward, we must begin as the generation that must salvage this country to put primacy on how, like Peter Gregory would say, will become more productive than consumptive. Like he also would say, we'll begin to use and spend Nigeria's resources accountably, proficiently. And that is why we're talking about moving from consumption to production. And that is why he's talking about being frugal. Nigerians are looking for a leader who will spend our resources effectively for the good of the nation. And that is why the obedient movement resonates. I could perhaps go on, but let me give the mic so that we can make this discussion interactive. I'll continue from where you ask your questions. Let's make it interactive.
Yeah.
Hand them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. It's been a pleasure listening to you. You started with the Chronicles of Nigeria, if I may say, from when we got independence, 1960 till this time, 62 years. We've seen an array of leaders from the citizens, from the military leaders to civilian leaders, and yet we're still struggling to find the Nigeria of our dreams. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to one of the members of the Obidati Presidential Campaign Council. He's a lawyer, a writer, a columnist, and the initiator of Country First, a Nigerian redemption movement, Professor Chris Mustapha Nwaokoabia. If you're just joining, it's been over 30 minutes of listening to him discuss what it would call, or what I would call, the underlying factors responsible for why we are where we are today. And one of the things that I could point out majorly in that chronology is the issue of corruption that's persisted over time. And we're still fighting or dealing with that issue of corruption right now. We still have a lot of questions to put forward, and conversation still has to go 360. But before I go on, again, for those who are just joining, you would have your opportunity to ask questions as we continue. So you can request for the mic and we make you a speaker. I have a couple of other people here already that are willing to ask and contribute. The topic is the Nigeria of our dream. And we are looking at how we can get to that part, especially using the 2023 elections. Hopefully, when we have our candidates become the winner of the election, that would be the catalyst to the Nigeria of our dreams. I have another person who I would love to have his own contribution before I go back to Prof right now. So as he said, we can make this as interactive as possible. This next speaker is also a member of the Obidati presidential campaign, and it's a pleasure to have with me an academic and social activist for good governance, Malam Danjuma Garba. Malam, it's a pleasure to have you here this evening. Would love you to unmute your mic and engage you a little bit before we get back to Professor Chris Nwaokoabia, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation and for having me, and as well as giving me the opportunity to say the little I know about our country and then respect to the topic. Yes, I appreciate how much Prof has led the general foundation, and let me just say a kind of general background to the Nigeria project from the pre-independence even to let me just say, to the present moment in time. Yes, so I would want to chip in and take off from the dimension of the very beginning of where it all started as the Nigerian problem, as well as where we lost the Nigerian dream and where we could not locate the Nigerian vision. But the best part of it all is today and right now, what we have, the wild wind blowing around, is totalistic and holistic as well as organic in the sense of the obedient movement. Yes. Where I think we've lost it all, and where I have tried within my own little area of interest to see if I can pin my pen or underline a common denominator that defines our own national consciousness. I think that has been wanting, and which is what has culminated into the present, let me just say, innate desire for a movement that is holistic in trying to bring around and bring out that very key thing called national consciousness. What we have had so far, like Prof has rightly pointed out and elaborated as well, that we appear more like independent nations, each nation with its own trajectory, but then by some design, we have come together through the process of the amalgamation, taking it to 1914, and then the very point of entry into Nigeria around the independence struggle and the various constitutions that were crafted just to hold us together as a nation. Now, one would notice that there have been shifts in this development, that Nigeria has not been able to, even till date, have a substantive constitution that defines what I would call this idea of national consciousness. It's not all about spelling out the various structures and then functions of government. Not necessarily that's what they, I mean, that's not all to national consciousness. So by this push, it means the founding fathers, after the so much the zest, the energy with which they embrace and approach the independence struggles, ought to have marked or try a project that would, bring about this element of our own national consciousness, which will be unique to us, considering our own different, let me just say, background, cultures, and even nationalisms that have come together under the flag, the green, white, green flag. Now, so if we would maybe fast forward, what the Obedient movement signify and epitomize are all those silent questions that we all ought to have addressed, all ought to have asked, and reach some point of consensus in what defines us and how we envision a country of our own called Nigeria. You could have all the resources, you could have all the human, intellectual, natural, you could have all the resources, but without a common ground of consciousness of what makes you a nation, I think all these things will not come together. Now, whatever I will say now would definitely be anchored around the Obedient movement and what makes it a movement, because it's very important, like Prof has rightly implied, what makes it a movement. Now, when you talk about a movement, it's, in other words, a kind of consciousness by itself. So if our listeners would want to ask, I mean, this very beautiful and expensive question is to say that, have we ever had a movement in Nigeria? For me, I know you'd have your own separate answers. I think about the only time we had a movement was independence. That was when we saw the political parties that emerged around that time were all united around a common purpose of achieving independence from the erstwhile colonial structure and the colonial hegemony. Yes, and it was so beautifully, crafted and done in the way that you could remember the alliance between the NPC of the Northern People's Congress, Northern Nigeria, and that of the NC of the Southeast or Southern Nigeria. Now, it was a beautiful union because it was a symbiotic relationship, a politically, a symbiotic relationship between, I would rather say it clearly, between the weak and the strong, and the strong representing NC, which is about the largest party in Africa, and the MPC, which is virtually an insignificant party in many ways, apart from just being a political party. Yeah, you could do this by comparing the caliber of the personality and the educational background of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe and that of the Northern People's champions then, Ahmadu Bello and Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. You could consider, go just do a little research, as to their background, then you will see how the relationship and that desire for a national consciousness came about. Now, I do like to smuggle in this fact of the significance contributions of the NC while at the process of drafting our 1954 constitution, when AG proposed that there should be a section that provides for the right to succeed in the event of maybe dissatisfaction with the existing structure. And then many people do not know this. It was Nnamdi Azikiwe himself that actually stood up against the inclusion of any, succession proviso or provision within the constitution itself, as spelling doom, which will not allow people to hunker and anchor that very spirit of national consciousness that is desired to push us forward as a nation. Now, and luckily enough, it was supported by, of course, the NPC, and then that was how no section, no provision for secession was entered or provided for in the 1954 Constitution. Now, the significance of this very narrative I'm trying to put out here is to just show us how much there was so much energy and how much the independence was in itself a kind of movement that was lost with achieving independence. Yes, it was lost after independence because all those actors were now preoccupied by party politics and other, administrative issues that the Nigerian project, in a way, was kind of toned down now until this 2023, when it's taking a new momentum as a phenomena that emerged within our socio-political sphere. So thanks to the personality of Gregory Peter Gregory Obi, and Yusuf Dati Baba Ahmad. Yes, and I think this is about one time that you have different facets to the movement, apart from just the desire for the good governance. Of course, if you would pay attention clearly, yeah, this is a time that Nigerians have become more conscious of their nationality without anyone telling them. Now, let me bring in this that the establishment of a national orientation agency was in a bid to see that a kind of national consciousness is fully defined and developed and made to reflect in every facet of our national life. But the question is, how many of us even hear about the National Orientation Agency, and especially at a time like this when they're supposed to be the moderators of every political discourse that must be in tandem with the national consciousness? But yeah, I know you all would believe me that there is nothing around that. So it's rather the obedient now and the obedient movement that is single-handedly, without being assigned, that is taking up this role of trying to see why do we have to support a candidate like Peter Obi and not maybe Atiku or a Tinubu in this context, and what are these things to look out in these people that would actually qualify them to take Nigeria to the promised land, or for us to the vision of our country, of our own of our own dream, I would say. Yeah, of course it's a dream, but then I think if we can envision everything, it can work. And now we have this epitomized in the personality of the Obidati, ticket. Now, if I would want to also put it out to all of us here, is to say that Nigeria is possible. Nigeria, the Nigeria of our vision, Nigeria of our dream, and Nigeria of our prayer is very possible if only we see the beauty of this movement that is coming up and that is taking over the political train of Nigeria. Yeah, so allow me to maybe yield the mic here for others to chip in. And
Thank
eventually,
you.
this is not a very structured discourse, but I think I've been able to offer my contribution in line with the topic given to me. Thank you so much. I yield.
Thank you very much, Malam Danjuma, for full explanations to this important topic. I would like to call on Tweet Doctor. I see your hand is raised. Let's hear you.
Good evening, Judith. Good evening, everybody. Prof, you are so much welcome. Thank you for being around in this space and actually laying a very good outline to this evening's discourse. Malam Danjuma Garba, you are so admired as well. I appreciate every one of us who actually has keyed into this dream. For me, I actually will narrow it to this discussion. Dreams, we know what dreams are, but like most philosophers and religious people, they've said the dreams are meant for old people, and young men and women are supposed to see visions. So what I actually see is that the people of the old, I don't call them leaders actually. And I think it's very wrong for anybody to call those wicked, monstrous, hard-hearted, corrupt people, the gangsters of the elite. That's what I call them. I don't call them leaders, because they are not leaders. Leaders are people who are actually meant to set an example. You find leaders in families, in communities, in societies. They are meant to be exemplary. But the ones we have in our country, they are not leaders. They are just a gang of wicked, corrupt elite, set of elite who connived. They all connived to steal our collective destiny, collective dreams.
I'm sorry to
But
cut things with Tweet Doctor. We might need you to wrap it up in 1 minute.
okay, ma'am.
Thank
Right.
you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think I will try to do that. So I feel like that we should look at it as a vision of the Nigerian youth, of what we are seeing today. Actually, from 1947 to before independence, we had the first movement, like Malam Garba said, actually. So this second movement, because we never actually had a movement after that time that brought us a political independence. So this second movement is what I term to be an economic and social independence of the Nigerian people. And surely, for sure, I think it's always, there is no coincidence that is not seen in history. So history is bound to repeat itself. This second movement will actually bring to us that political, economic, social independence that all of us so desires. But whereby if we actually get it wrong, because if we can actually see this movement cuts across all tribes, this is the first time that actually I am being conscious. I don't see my brother from Medugri as different from my brother from Yenagoa, from Olu, from Imo, from Ondo. I now see everybody who has keyed into this vision as my brother, as my sister. So this is an organic movement that is bound to succeed. Whether they like
Thank you
it or whether
very
they don't
much.
like it, it's of no consequence, but it's bound to happen. Thank you for giving me time, and I give the mic.
Thank you very much, Tweet Doctor. So we'll be moving on to Spotlight Abby. May we hear you, what you have to say about the Nigerian of our dream?
Okay, hello, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me, please? Hello? Judy, please just let me know if you can hear me.
Loud and clear, we can.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Good evening,
Good
Prof,
evening.
and everyone here. I'll just start off by saying that personally, I'm one of those people that's been much confident. All I needed to do, all I wanted to do was just, pursue my own personal dreams, go to school. I did very well, came out, got a job and all of that, got married, had children, blah, 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 blah. So there was really no consciousness of, that concept of nationhood in me. At best, it was personal morality that, and of course, my own personal convictions. So, so just to bring it forward to what's happening now, there wasn't really that consciousness of, that nationhood or what the nation stands for, because in most other societies, from the time you are born, you already the society begin to entrench their values on you through your culture, through your family, through all the agents of socialization, your school, It's so intense that a child in the US that is maybe like 4 or 5 can actually tell you a bit of their history. They can tell you what they stand for. They can tell you there's this hope and there's this aspiration that you see in their eyes when they talk about their country. And that is how patriotism is birthed. So you see people having that consciousness or being, formally trained to believe that their nation means something. And that is one thing that was lacking in Nigeria. If you go through the timelines of many people, you see that they keep telling us, people keep saying that beyond football, the next, most unifying factor in Nigeria right now is P2B. But before I even get to that level, just to show that me and a lot of other people did not get that opportunity to be taught and formally socialized into a system where we believe that our nation stood for something. It was all man for himself. It was basically like chaos across all sectors of the country. So that's why you find out that. Am I done? Do I have a minute or two to wrap up?
Let's give you one more minute to wrap it up real quick, so that we can bring in Prof Chris into the discussion. There's so many areas that we want him to touch before the time.
Okay, so let me just do this. Okay, so basically what I'm just about now is that the nation of my dream, or the Nigeria of my dream, is one where the leadership, because it's a nexus between nature and nurture, being that the country itself, the leadership of the country, understands what it means to be a leader, what people at the top really understand as leadership, and the people, which is us, also know what to do as a people, whom to hold accountable, how to contribute to the society, to ensure that everybody is moving along in the same direction. And so for me, it's right now that Nigeria will start for me when we elect P2B into that office in Aso Rock, and he's able to galvanize all the different sectors of this country, so that we actually have national values that we stand for, and people will begin to move in the same direction. Thank you for now. I yield.
Thank you very much. So, Prof, we are coming back to you. This topic, the Nigeria of our dream, it's become very much of a common discussion these days. Japa, you're not going to Japa. So that's why this topic is very, very dear to heart, because I am very sure and certain that there's so many Nigerians abroad that even want to come home. So that's why that's why this topic is quite important. So I want to quickly move in the area of subsidy, fuel subsidy. In the dailies of today, the Nation's newspaper reported the former Emir of Kano State, the former Emir Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi. He said that, I pity I'm sorry for the next president concerning subsidy. May we hear you, what the new Nigeria of our dream holds regarding this very important aspect that affects every person in this country?
That's a very deep one, but let me, before I go to that, address what the issues my brother Malam Danjuma raised, and the last speaker. I totally believe that since independence, we have had this movement as a third movement in our history. And the reasons I say that is that before independence, it was 1929 that we had the Aba Women Riot. And the events that followed the very next year was a rude shock for the British. 30 years after we had independence. 30 years after, 3 years after we had independence, we had a Republican Constitution. 30 years after that, we had the June 12th mobilization. And I don't know whether you remember how many, not 1/10 of the number of lives that were lost in the effort to actualize June 12th was lost in the history, in the battle for independence. That was the greatest movement. The youths, so many of us, Showore, myself, with all sense of respect, you may not like it, but that's the truth. Festus Keyamo, Gani Fahimi, Femi Falana, Shehu Sani, so many of us had time in jail fighting for the actualization of June 12th. 30 years after, your generation, so many young people, as obedience, are calling for a new day. And they're doing that profoundly, profusely, and passionately. But back to your question, I truly, like the former Emir of Kano said, I truly myself sympathize with the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, my principal, your principal, Peter Gregory Obi. Regarding the fraud and the scam that has made monstrous, soulless billionaires, that has made people who would rather that our refineries are not working, who would rather that we continue to import that which we have in millions, who would rather that our country is bare-chested, who would rather that our economy is down and flat. I pray that we're able to pull through with the ballot-based people's revolution that we're pushing. I pray. And somehow I believe that we will. We won't feel like we failed in 1993 because God is watching over us. We won't fail because your passion is amazing. We won't fail because there's no Abacha to use his guns and the Saladins on us at Ikorodu Road, at Maryland, Mende, Maryland, across the streets of Awolowo Road in Ikeja, where they used tear gas canisters and live bullets on young people who fought for the actualization of June 12th. We won't fail because God is with us. We won't fail because we have a pan-Nigerian movement. I'm so proud and happy with the involvement of my brothers across the 6 geopolitical zones. It is only in the obedient movement that you have Nigerians. People are not calling themselves Igbos, Hausas, or Yorubas. People are committed to the effort and the battle to take back their country. And so if Peter Gregory Obi emerges as president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria come May 29th, 2023, his government will be deriving credibility from the Nigerian people. So it becomes easier for him to remove the fuel subsidy, the scam. I told people, and I said that on Channels TV a few days ago on Sunrise Show, that if Buhari were sincere with the APC, he would have been able to remove the scam called the fuel subsidy regime in 2015, when Nigerians were still excited, believing that he has come to change the ante. But unfortunately, they were not by any means sincere or true to what they said on paper. Now we have an opportunity to take away these behemoths and these looters, the scammers who would rather that our refineries are not working. Are you aware that a few years ago we were the #1 oil producing country in Africa? Angola took over and we became #2 for a while. Today, do you know how much barrels of crude oil are stolen daily? That's a failure of leadership. And you know what? even before becoming president, our principal, Peter Gregory Obi, has become the conscience of the nation. Are you aware that today the major inquisition into oil theft was because he made that quotable quote? I quote him, that oil theft is not like stealing sweet in a supermarket and putting it in your pocket. That the authorities and government, the leadership, and those in power are the ones who are doing it. And that's what is happening today. Across the Niger Delta space, you have seen manholes and new connections to our collective wealth, where individuals who have the imprimatur of government are stealing our collective wealth. And like I said, we have never had it this bad, where a man steals what belongs to him and leaves his family in hunger. That's how bad it is. And I don't know whether you are all aware that for a super tanker to come into your territorial waters, the president is aware, the chief of army staff is aware, the chief of naval staff is aware. I don't know whether you know that the military agencies and the customs are aware. So you ask yourself, how do these tankers come in to steal oils in millions of barrels and nobody's stopping them? They collude. It's a grand conspiracy to loot our collective wealth. And so is the sister to this whole scam, the subsidy regime. If we had our refineries working, or if we had the ones that have been licensed for over 10 years running, nobody will be talking about subsidy. Are you aware that as you and I talk today, that a refinery has sprung up in Niger Republic? Are you aware that there's a refinery springing up in Ghana? There's another one in Cote d'Ivoire. Countries that do not have 1/10 of our crude oil wealth. And you ask yourself, what kind of people should pretend over this country? And that's why, as we discuss and talk about the future and the dreams of our country, you must wake up like people who are possessed by an excellent spirit. You must wake up knowing that our future and our destiny depends on this and what we do today. You must wake up and passionately go through the streets, door to door, house to house, lounge to lounge, supermarket to supermarket, school to school, everywhere, preaching the message, because the only way the next president can survive and lead us out of the morass is for him to emerge predicated on a people's revolution like we're doing. It's a peaceful ballot-based revolution. And so if Peter Gregory Obi emerges through what we are all doing, he becomes a president who can say to the oil marketers and the majors, I will not pay spurious claims in the name of subsidy. I want to create an enabling environment where the licensed refineries can operate. I want to ensure that we do not allow the smuggling of our oil, crude, or finished product to neighboring countries. And I want to ensure that our upstream and downstream sector is predictable, accountable, and transparent. And it's only a president who derives power from the people, because if he does not have the support of the people, the oil marketers and the majors will hold him hostage and frustrate his good intentions. So the only person who can redeem and help us come 2023 is a president that comes to power with monstrous goodwill from the people. And that's why I keep telling people that I'm excited that we're great bearers of a new hope and a new dawn for our country. That we're great bearers of the dream that we collectively hold and nurture. That we're strong mercenaries and missionaries pushing a new narrative that will redeem our country from the strangleholds of people without conscience. So, Judith, like I'm saying, I believe that what we need come 2023 is a president who loves our nation, is a president who is frugal, is a president who is committed, is a president who is passionate, is a president who loves our country, and a president who is ready to work. And kindly and frankly, if you look at, please let me just bury this. If you look at the four front runners, there's only one man, only one candidate that can address the fundamentals of our nation. The first two that I will name, Atiku Abubakar, you know his story. Go to Google, check Senate papers, USA, and you will see that his partners in malfeasance, his partners in larceny, are serving time in American prisons for over $240 million that he brought into America with his former wife. Go down to the other candidate who told Nigerians in Kaduna yesterday that along with El Rufai, they will take Nigeria